the President of the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences, past Presidents of the Academy, Vice Presidents of the Academy, Fellows, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and our students. On behalf of the Fellows of the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences, I warmly welcome you to today's annual lecture in the Sciences, to be delivered by Professor A.C. Sackeyfio, a Fellow of the Academy. On behalf of the Academy, we acknowledge the generous support of all those who have made this program possible. Shall we give all the sponsors a round of applause? The chairman of today's event is the Vice President of the Sciences section of the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences. He's a professor in the Department of Food Process Engineering, the University of Ghana. He's a fellow of the International Academy of Food Science and Technology and also a fellow of the Kellogg Foundation Leadership Program. He's the immediate vice chairperson of the FAO WHO Codex Alimentarius Commission based in Rome and Geneva, and he was or is the foundation dean of the Faculty of Engineering Sciences, University of Ghana. He was the chairman of the planning committee for the establishment of two public universities, University of Energy and Natural Resources at Sunyani and University of Health and Allied Sciences at Ho. And he was the team lead consultant development and preparation of Ghana's second Millennium Challenge Compact. He is the immediate past board chairman, Millennium Development Authority. Ladies and gentlemen, help me to welcome the chairman for the occasion, Professor Samuel Kofi Sefadede.
Thank you very much, Honorary Secretary, for the introduction. The President of the Academy, Vice Presidents of the Academy, former Presidents and Vice Presidents, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, this evening we have the privilege of hearing a very interesting subject matter: stress and rest, pharmacodynamic modulation for sustainable human health. And to help us to do this, to give us an insight into this very interesting topic, is a distinguished pharmacologist of this nation, Professor Arthur Komi Sackeyfio, the foundation dean of the School of Pharmacy at the University of Ghana. He holds a PhD in pharmacology and has worked extensively in this field, served as external examiner in several universities, and initiated work and research in this field. Indeed, we are privileged to have him give this year's lecture in the Sciences on a topic that is very dear to him. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Professor Sackeyfio.
Chair, President of the Academy, former Presidents of the Academy, Vice Presidents of the Academy, Honorary Secretary of the Academy, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is my greatest pleasure to accept this invitation to address the Academy and the general public on a topic that I think should be of concern to the entire nation. Stress and rest. Pharmacodynamic modulation for human health. Mr. Chairman, since we've got some students in the audience, I like to do something that I normally wouldn't do in a public forum like this, but in the lecture room. And that is, I will pose two questions to our young friends at the beginning of the lecture, so that at the end of the lecture I'll get answers from them. The two questions that I have to put are: one, can we tell when human beings will die? Is there a formula that we can present for the date of death, since we know the date of birth? And I'll give the conditions. Assuming that the vital organs of the body operate at 20%, 100% at age 20. If at age 20 your vital organ function is 100%, and there is a 10% decline in the function every decade, or 1% decline every year, and at zero function you are dead, then at what age will you be dead? That is question number one. Question number two: if you sleep for 8 hours a day and you retire at age 60, for how long will you have been sleeping at the time of your retirement? Question number two is, you sleep 8 hours a day, you retire at age 60, there's a decline you sleep 8 hours a day, the 24 hours, and you retire at age 60. By the time you retire, for how long will you have been sleeping? Mr. Chair, the adults may also attempt the questions, but I'm targeting the young friends. Our topic for discussion this afternoon is stress and rest, pharmacodynamic modulation for sustainable human health. I will attempt to present the topic under the following headings: stress and rest defined, science perspectives, disease perspectives, and I will attempt to give you some ideas from my research results. We will then look at the social implications. Then I will give some religious anecdotes, if you don't mind. Then we'll draw conclusions and give an acknowledgement. Stress has been defined by Hans Selye, the father of stress. And Selye suggests that stress is any form of noxious biological, physical, or psychological stimulus to which an animal or human is exposed. Such a stimulus may cause reversible or irreversible disequilibrium or disturbance in the normal physiology or emotion of the animal or human that is stressed. In other words, stress is something that is not pleasant, physiologically speaking. Stress, furthermore, amplifies pain. If you have experienced pain in your life, you would know that pain is not at all pleasant, but stress amplifies it. Rest may also be defined, again, according to Selye, as rest is the process of refraining from vigorous utilization of physiological energy with consequential restoration of spent energy. Rest also magnifies or manifests complete relaxation from psychological and sociocultural engagement. You know what it means not to take rest. You are fighting against yourself all the time, and you are not relaxed. Rest mitigates pain, whereas stress enhances or promotes pain. Rest, on the other hand, will mitigate pain. Now let's look at the science perspectives of the matter. And we will base the scientific perspectives on three key principles. One, Hans Selye's general adaptation syndrome. Two, the hypothalamo-pituitary adrenal axis. And three, Le Chatelier's principle. These are scientific principles that are well known, and they have been put to us from secondary school through university. But the general public also knows that there must be principles such as the general adaptation syndrome, the hypothalamo-pituitary adrenal axis. It's a reference to the organs of the body and what we do to sustain life. And Le Chatelier's principle is a principle that operates everywhere and anywhere. It operates in religion, in mathematics, in physics, in music, even in parliament, in politics. So we will look at these principles in our attempt to discuss the scientific perspectives of stress and rest. Now let's look at SELYE'S general adaptation syndrome in a little more detail. The body responds to stress by releasing the hormone called adrenaline, and that is for alarm, and then the hormone cortisol to facilitate adaptation to the stress. In other words, stress becomes established through the mediator of adrenaline, and because the body must live and sustain life, cortisol is mobilized so that adaptation to the stress will prevail. SELYE identified 3 stages of the general adaptation syndrome, namely alarm, resistance, and thirdly, exhaustion. So, for the general adaptation syndrome, we've got these 3 stages: the alarm stage, the resistance stage, and the exhaustion stage. The details of these are: for the alarm stage, stress informs the body of imminent threat to physiology or destabilization of emotion. That is what adrenaline does. Adrenaline will call to order. The imminent threat to the physiology or destabilization of emotion. Adrenaline mediates this threat and prepares the body for the so-called fight or flight response. Adrenaline, furthermore, triggers the release of cortisol by activating the hypothalamus-pituitary adrenal axis so that adaptation may be facilitated. I have indicated already that adrenaline is a hormone which is derived from the adrenal medulla. Cortisol is also a hormone derived from the adrenal cortex. Both hormones come from the adrenal gland for a very good reason, which we will soon see. Now, the resistance stage by SELYE goes like this. Following the alarm stage, a period of resistance ensues. Homeostasis, which is a regulatory physiological process, sets in to stabilize and maintain parameters such as blood pressure, body temperature, electrolyte balance within narrow range of normalcy. In other words, as much as possible, we should not move away too much from the central control mechanisms of the body. Adverse effects of the stress are resolved when the resistance stage prevails, and if the stress persists, then physiological energy is exhausted and ill health manifests. I will keep stressing the fact that stress is not good for the body. So if you are stressed and you are wise enough to rest, then stress will not persist. But if you don't rest, then the stress will persist and will become chronic. And the energy that is usurped and taken up by stress, physiological energy, will become exhausted and ill health will manifest. Next is the exhaustion stage. The stage of physiological exhaustion is often referred to as adrenal fatigue, overload, burnout, dysfunction, or maladaptation. Chronic stress leads to cellular damage in tissues and organs, and ultimately there may be malfunction of the autonomic nervous system, resulting in ill health. Let me say one or two things about the autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system is one of two systems. The other is the central nervous system. The central nervous system is centrally placed. The autonomic nervous system also has central components as well as peripheral components. But there are two factors in the autonomic nervous system: the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. And these two systems operate in such a manner that there's always equilibrium, and the two provide a fine balance so that we don't move away too much from the fine tuning of the physiology. For example, constipation is under the control of the sympathetic system, whereas diarrhea is under the control of the parasympathetic system. The two work together to strike a fine balance so that under normal circumstances you have neither constipation nor diarrhea. If either of them supersedes, then you get the consequence of that dominance. If the sympathetic system dominates, you are likely to get more of constipation than diarrhea, and vice versa for the parasympathetic system. But I must also emphasize the fact that when there is imbalance between the two systems, then there is ill health. The hypothalamo-pituitary adrenal axis can be defined as a stimulus that may start with the hypothalamus. This organ, or part of the organ, the central nervous system, is the highest center of the autonomic nervous system. It controls functions such as emotion, hunger, thirst, body temperature regulation. The pituitary gland is a small oval gland which secretes the hormone corticotrophin. Let me not apologize too much to our young friends for some of these huge terms. You will soon get to understand them as we go along. The adrenal gland lies above each kidney, and the cortex of the gland secretes cortisol, and the medulla secretes adrenaline. I'll say a few more things about that in a minute or two. There are diseases, several diseases that are linked up with these organs and systems. For example, in asthma, we think that there may be dominance of the parasympathetic system because the lungs are in distress. And it is because we do not have a good functioning sympathetic system. That is why we experience asthma, for those who are vulnerable. The diagram on the screen gives us an impression of what happens when the hypothalamus is stimulated with adrenaline. I've told you that adrenaline is sourced from the adrenal medulla. It will circulate in the system and reach the hypothalamus. When it does, then the hypothalamus will be stimulated by the adrenaline, and corticotrophin releasing hormone will be released. The released corticotrophin will reach the anterior pituitary gland, and the corticotrophin releasing hormone will then stimulate the anterior pituitary gland so that it secretes corticotrophin, which is ACTH. The ACTH so released will reach the adrenal cortex, stimulate it so that the cortex releases cortisol. Cortisol is the mighty anti-stress, anti-inflammatory hormone. So the idea is to guide you to link adrenaline with the hypothalamus and cortisol with the adrenal cortex. So adrenaline goes from the adrenal medulla to reach the hypothalamus, then it goes through a process until finally cortisol is released from the adrenal cortex. You see the two parts of the adrenal gland. The medulla secretes adrenaline so that through a process of stimulations, cortisol will be released from the cortex. But if the two are in the same organ, why should they go through that process, that circuitous process? Can't adrenaline just tell cortisol to be released without going through? But there's a good reason why that should happen, because of checks and balances. If the two operate within the organ without reference to the hypothalamus, the pituitary, and so on, then they will do their own thing and nobody can control them. But the hypothalamus is there for control so that it will eventually go through the hypothalamo-pituitary adrenal axis for cortisol to be released from the adrenal cortex. What is the relevance of adrenaline in stress? Adrenaline, as I've indicated, stimulates the hypothalamus for a purpose. There is an enzyme, a very important and significant enzyme in the immune system. What I'm talking to you about is immunology. The immune system is being played upon. That enzyme is called adenylate cyclase. Adrenaline stimulates it. I'll tell you a few more about adenylate cyclase in a minute. Adrenaline reverses anaphylactic vasodilatation. When we have anaphylaxis, then there's a problem. The body responds to adverse stimuli, and there is respiratory distress, there's massive skin encounter, the surfaces, those parts of the body that are exposed to the environment, are all challenged. And these surfaces weep, literally weep. There's massive release of fluid. And the lungs particularly are vulnerable when we have anaphylaxis. The patients who suffer anaphylaxis may die if they are not lucky. But adrenaline is critical in organizing and controlling anaphylaxis. So anaphylactic vasodilatation. Why vasodilatation? Vasodilatation is the opening up of the blood vessels so that blood volume within the blood vessels increase. And then there is leakage of fluid into the interstitial peripheral vasculature. When that happens, then blood volume is being lost into the tissues, blood volume within the circulatory system drops, and if the venous return falls, then blood that is going to the heart, the volume is reduced. The heart is now no longer able to pump blood out to vital organs like the brain, and you know what blood does. It carries vital oxygen. So if the brain is now receiving blood at a lowered volume, then not much oxygen is going to reach the brain, and the consequences are serious. If the brain does not receive oxygen, much or adequate oxygen, the patient may faint or may even die. So anaphylaxis is critically important, and adrenaline, fortunately for us, from the adrenal medulla reverses the effects of adrenal anaphylactic vasodilatation. Adrenaline also reverses anaphylactic bronchospasm. This also is critically important. Stress reduces the function of the lungs by causing constriction, so that enough oxygen is not provided. So the bronchodilator activity of adrenaline saves the situation. It reverses the bronchospasm that is caused by complement and hormones such as histamine. We are lucky, unfortunately, that adrenaline from the adrenal medulla can reverse anaphylactic bronchospasm. Adrenaline is life-saving in general shock. The shock that I described not too long ago, involving the circulation of oxygen. So these functions of adrenaline are critical, and I've just told you that when stress occurs, then adrenaline is released so that the fight-flight response may prevail. I told you about cyclic adenylate cyclase. There's a substance in the body called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. It is an energy-loaded substance. It can be converted to cyclic adenosine monophosphate and further to adenosine monophosphate, not cyclic, but ordinary adenosine monophosphate. There's a very good reason why I'm showing you this slide. And the reason is this. The metabolism of ATP through cyclic AMP to AMP is so important that the enzyme 1, adenylate cyclase, and 2, phosphodiesterase, are operational. And what they do is that they ensure that ATP is converted to cyclic AMP under the influence of adenylate cyclase, that is 1, and 2, cyclic AMP is converted to AMP under the influence of phosphodiesterase. Adenylate cyclase is the enzyme that catalyzes conversion of ATP to cyclic AMP. And this enzyme is stimulated by adrenaline. Therefore, under the influence of adrenaline, adenylate cyclase will be stimulated to cause the conversion of ATP to cyclic AMP. We know that if the intracellular level of cyclic AMP is raised, then a lot of things can happen. One of which is that the release of substances that are pro-stress will be reduced. So adrenaline is doing something here. It is stimulating ATP metabolism so that intracellular levels of cyclic AMP will rise. And when that happens, then further discomfort resulting from the release of mediators of inflammation and stress will be reduced. Adrenaline is important. The second enzyme, phosphodiesterase, is the enzyme that catalyzes the conversion of cyclic AMP to AMP. This enzyme can be inhibited because if we, in spite of the fact that we would rather have a rise in intracellular cyclic AMP, we cause a reduction, then there will be problems. A rise results in the inhibition of the release of mediators of inflammation. In other words, a rise in intracellular cyclic AMP will go against stress. But if we reduce intracellular cyclic AMP, then we will promote stress. Therefore, we need to inhibit the enzyme that catalyzes the conversion of cyclic AMP to AMP to conserve the level of cyclic AMP. And there are substances that can inhibit phosphodiesterase. They include the methylxanthines, such as coffee, tea, cocoa. So if you indulge in the consumption of coffee, tea, and cocoa, you are likely to inhibit phosphodiesterase and therefore cause a rise in intracellular cyclic AMP, and that will inhibit stress. Please don't run to the shops to buy coffee, tea, and cocoa, because there are side effects that are inimical to health. Don't indulge excessively in the consumption of coffee, tea, and cocoa. There's an attempt to reduce the caffeine in coffee, decaffeinated, so that the body will be happy when you drink it. Stimulation of adenylate cyclase. You see, I'm talking a lot about this enzyme, adenylate cyclase, because it is an important enzyme in the stress response. This chart tells us what I have already told you. ATP is going through the metabolic pathway to AMP via the intermediate cyclic AMP under the influence of adenylate cyclase, and from cyclic AMP to AMP phosphodiesterase. Histamine, prostaglandins, adrenaline can stimulate the enzyme adenylate cyclase and therefore will tend to cause a rise in intracellular cyclic AMP. Then there will be inhibition of antigen-induced release of the mediators of inflammation. The other side of the story is that phosphodiesterase, which will otherwise cause an increase in the metabolism of cyclic AMP to AMP, can be inhibited so that we can achieve a rise in intracellular cyclic AMP. And the methylxanthines, theophylline, caffeine, are the substances that can inhibit. Now, what can we say about the SELYE'S principle? When I told Professor Aloti, the former president of the Academy, that in this lecture I will say things about the SELYE'S principle, he wondered how the SELYE'S principle, which is a function, chemistry, mathematics. When you have a mathematical equation, the left side and the right side are linked with the equal sign. If you allow things to rest, you are all right. But if you do something to the right side, which you don't do to the left side, then there will be confusion, a mathematical confusion. That is why Professor Aloti wondered what I was going to say about the SELYE'S principle in a stress-rest issue. But I hope that you are beginning to see the need for a compromise and equilibrium to be maintained between stress and rest. So, in chemistry, the SELYE'S principle, which is also called the equilibrium law, can be used to predict the effect of a change in conditions on a chemical equilibrium. The principle is named after Henry Louis Le Chatelier, and it is sometimes also referred to as Carl Ferdinand's law, because both of them independently discovered the principle. It can be stated as follows. When any system at equilibrium is subjected to a change in concentration, temperature, volume, or pressure, then the system readjusts itself to counter the effect of the applied change, and a new equilibrium is established. In other words, Whenever a system in equilibrium is disturbed, the system will adjust itself in such a way that the effect of the change will be annulled. Let me say something about social life at this stage. I'll come back to it. When people flout the laws of the land, they are opposed by the judicial system. We can allow the laws of the land to operate to bring them to book, or we can do something otherwise. We've only recently had a very nasty experience in this country where some people in a village, I shall not name, took the law into their own hands to deal with the culprit. Nature has a way of managing conflict, and we should allow the law of the land to operate because there is order. If you try to manage disorder, social disorder, by being unlawful yourself, you will create more problems rather than solve the problems. So, Le Chatelier is saying that whenever a system in equilibrium is disturbed by whatever stimulus, then the system will so adjust itself as to effect a change. The system will oppose the stimulus that is causing the disturbance so that that change is nullified. What do unto others as you would like them to do unto you situation. I think the lawyers have a way of calling people to book, but do they do it effectively all the time? Or do we have disturbances even within the legal system? I don't want to debate that. I will leave that entirely in the hands of the lawyers. At the appropriate time, I'll say a few things about that. In biology, we've dealt with the chemistry aspect. In biology or physiology, stress can be the force that is applied to a tissue, organ, or body. And the corresponding response, which is termed homeostasis, reflects Le Chatelier's principle. Homeostasis is a system that brings under control disturbances in the physiological system. So, for example, if the body temperature is rising, the hypothalamus is the controlling center to ensure that the body temperature does not run away without control. Sometimes we have taxi drivers going contra to the traffic lights, and there are policemen around who see and supervise and say nothing. Just like St. Paul, when Stephen was being stoned, took the garments of the stoners and watched Paul stoned. There are people in this country who do lawless things in spite of the fact that we've got the laws of the land. And the law enforcement agencies must operate so that we have peace in our nation. Endogenous compensatory mechanisms are involved in homeostasis. In other words, when the system is being shifted in a certain direction, there are compensatory mechanisms that are called to bear on the system so that we don't have a runaway system uncontrolled. I'll mention some of the endogenous compensatory mechanisms in a minute. Such mechanisms are mediated by specific endogenous substances. You see, nature has everything that we need to live. That is why I pose the question to the youth. What is going to be the age of death? Call for the answer soon. These are mediators of homeostasis. There's a stressor, there's an endogenous mediator, there's a source for the mediator, and there's an effect. For the first one, the stressor is hyperglycemia. Hyperglycemia simply meaning a rise or high sugar level in the blood. Hyperglycemia, high concentration of sugar in the blood. And what is the mediator? The endogenous mediator for this condition is insulin. It is sourced from the beta cells of the Langerhans in the pancreas. Nature is well organized. So the beta cells of the islet of Langerhans in the pancreas will provide us with adrenaline. And that insulin, that insulin will effectively control hyperglycemia. So what insulin is doing in this system is that it is controlling carbohydrate metabolism in order to maintain a normal blood glucose level. What about hypoglycemia, the opposite of hyperglycemia? If hyper means a rise in concentration of blood sugar, then hypo is the fall, a low concentration in the blood sugar. And the endogenous mediator is glucagon. Glucagon. That is derived from the alpha cells of the islets of Langerhans in the pancreas. Now, here is another example of one organ containing two hormones. One from the beta cells, adrenal insulin, and the other from the alpha cells, glucagon, and they do opposite things. They are there to have a feedback system to control blood glucose levels. Adrenaline will control it and bring it down, whereas glucagon will attempt to raise it up. If it is being lowered, it shouldn't be uncontrollably lowered. So what does glucagon do? It converts glycogen to glucose, thereby preventing blood sugar from falling too low during a fast. When you are fasting, your blood glucose level is not likely to be high. It's when you eat that the blood glucose level goes up. So adrenaline, when you have eaten, not adrenaline, why do I keep saying adrenaline? Because I like adrenaline. Insulin is the one that is released so that we can control a rising blood glucose level. And glucagon is the opposite hormone that controls a fall in the blood glucose level. Neither of them should go without control. So whereas insulin is controlling the rise, glucagon is controlling the fall. More mediators of homeostasis. The stressor is anaphylaxis. For anaphylaxis, the endogenous mediator or mediators are histamine and adrenaline. The source of histamine is the mast cells. And the source of adrenaline is the adrenal medulla. What is the effect of the mediator? Skin rashes, vasodilatation for histamine, and for adrenaline, and even histamine, there's bronchoconstriction and a reversal of all these by adrenaline. So these are hormones that go together, one checking the other, so that we have an equilibrium state in the system. Then the next stressor that I want to mention is inflammation. Inflammation is such a wide term, but it exists within the system. Inflammation. A lot of diseases encounter inflammation. The endogenous mediator for inflammation that we are considering here is the annexins. There are 3 examples of the annexins. These are proteins. Lipocortin, lipomodulin, and macrocortin. These are proteins that form the substance called annexins. They are sourced from monocytes. In other words, they form a serious part of the immune system. What is the effect of the mediator? There is inhibition of the enzyme phospholipase A2. When phospholipase A2 is inhibited, then metabolic conversion of membrane phospholipid to a substance called arachidonic acid is blocked. What is the significance of blockade of the metabolism of arachidonic acid? The significance is that the terminal metabolites of arachidonic acid, which by and large are involved in numerous diseases, including hypertension, asthma, even stroke, arthritis. These diseases are mediated by the terminal metabolites of arachidonic acid. So if you don't want trouble, find something to block the metabolism of arachidonic acid. And what happens with the annexins is that the annexins have the ability to inhibit phospholipase A2. How do we get the annexins? Cortisol, the master anti-inflammatory hormone, stimulates the formation of the annexins, and therefore indirectly cortisol will inhibit phospholipase A2, anti-stress elimination of the disease mediators called the metabolites of arachidonic acid. The final mediator of homeostasis is pain. Pain. This is the stressor. Pain is intensely stressful, and the mediators of homeostasis internally are the endogenous opioids, endorphins, enkephalins, dynorphins. These opioids that are naturally occurring within the body are there to deal with pain. And these substances are sourced from the brain, the hippocampus of the brain. And what is the effect? These mediators act as neurotransmitters and neuromodulators to produce analgesia, pain relief analgesia. So we've got internal hormones that can handle pain. We don't need to go and take external analgesics, provided we live and can predict the date of death. I'll come back in a minute. Now, let's look at the disease perspectives. In stress and rest. Stress-driven diseases include hypertension and other cardiovascular disorders, central nervous system or psychosomatic disorders, diseases of the respiratory, digestive, and endocrine systems. Stress is an intruder in the physiology. It affects a lot of things. It disrupts the physiology and brings onto us diseases. Look at these diseases. There are a whole lot of diseases that are engendered by stress. I have to say that lifestyle and diet-related diseases are also sometimes stress-driven. If you get up in the morning and you fail to eat your breakfast till about 1 p.m., you get a certain type of headache that cannot be treated effectively with medicines. It is pulsating and it's not amenable to drug treatment. What you have to do is to eat when you get that type of headache. It is called histamine headache because if you fail to eat, histamine will be released. It is stress. Histamine is released. And histamine does a lot of things, including creating an acid secretion in the body. Histamine induces gastric acid secretion so that your gastrointestinal lining will be eaten up by acid. If you persistently fail to have your breakfast till about 1 or 2 p.m., you will develop gastrointestinal ulceration through histamine. So don't do it. Is it because you don't have money to buy food? Or you don't have a wife to cook for you? Or a husband to help you have your breakfast? Time. That Professor Brobe, I'll be coming to that in a minute. If we don't have time to eat, we will have time to die. Chronic and excessive stress is debilitating and life-threatening because it saps health-sustaining energy that is needed for physiological activity. Chronic stress is debilitating. Chronic stress also makes people so miserable as to drive them to alcoholism and tobacco and substance abuse. This is unfortunate, most unfortunate. I heard some time ago when Margaret Thatcher was promoting Scotch whiskey for export. Scotch whiskey for export. Because the economy of the UK will be adversely affected if people around the world don't drink Scotch whiskey. So regardless of the ill effects of alcohol, Britain must promote the sale and consumption of Scotch whiskey. What is the date of death? We'll come to that in a minute. The major signs and symptoms of stress include nervousness, depression, restlessness, sleep disorder, loss of appetite and sweating, irritability, hot flashes, and quick temper. Can you imagine when you drive along the roads in Ghana and the truck drivers go in the opposite direction? If the one-way system is right to left, you see taxis and drivers and motorists going left to right. And you in your car, you get irritable, you get hot flashes, you are quick-tempered, you say things that you normally wouldn't say to the hearing of your spouse. Because there are people who are flouting the motor traffic regulations. So you are overly stressed and you go through restlessness, nervousness, depression. But if the stress is chronic, then I'm afraid you will have to look for a psychiatrist. I'm not saying things that should frighten you. I'm only telling you the scientific facts that excessive and chronic stress will require the psychiatric counseling that you bring upon yourself. Now let me say a few things about my personal research observations. I'm going to talk to you about complement. So, what is complement? I'll say something about the complement and the immune system. I'll say something about complement, stress, and tachyphylaxis. And then I'll say something about the significance of rest after stress. Complement is a system of polypeptides present in plasma. To our young scientists, polypeptides are proteins, a collection of amino acids put together in a special way to give us proteins, peptides, polypeptides, proteins. The system consists of 9 fractions C1 to C9. C3 and C5 constitute anaphylatoxin. As a matter of fact, the complement fractions, because C1 has 3 components, it is usually recognized as being 11 fractions. Functionally, complement is a set of enzymes that act within the immune system. So when we talk about stress, which triggers the immune system, then we are talking about complement. Complement and immunity. Functionally, Complement is an integral part of the immune system. It facilitates the killing of bacteria and viruses by opsonization, phagocytosis, and osmotic lysis. Then, complement is tachyphylactogenic. What does it mean? Kingsley Ominchire, complement is tachyphylactogenic. It means it generates tachyphylaxis. Tachyphylactogenic complement. Antigen-antibody complexes trigger the activation of C3, C5, the fractions of complement, leading to the release of histamine and other mediators of inflammation, and also trigger the cascade of the immune reactions. This, in fact, mitigates stress. So when complement is activated, then we expect that there will be mitigation of stress. And complement is part of the natural system. It is part of the natural system there to enable us survive life. So let me describe to you the scientific evidence of the tachyphylaxis that is generated by complement. You can set up an experiment. In that experiment, you will prepare a laboratory animal and measure the systemic blood pressure and also the lung function. You can monitor the bronchoconstriction or bronchodilation of the lungs, and in addition, and simultaneously, measure the systemic blood pressure, looking at the fall in the blood pressure and the rise in blood pressure simultaneously. You can do this by injecting the laboratory animal complement. When you do, and you measure these parameters, there is the fall in blood pressure, that is the deep pressure response at the top, that is the top panel. The middle panel is the pressure, that is the rise in blood pressure. And the bottom panel is bronchoconstriction. What I did here was to serially administer complement. The first administration, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, in that order. It was clear that the same dose of complement administered to the laboratory animal at point number 1 was measured as 100% response. The second one was lower. For if you consider pressure, the pressure effect, the two lower curves, the pressure effect and the bronchoconstrictor effect, those were reduced in magnitude. But the deep pressure effect was not subject to tachyphylaxis. Tachyphylaxis to complement 0.5 ml per kilogram body weight, administered intravenously at 10-minute intervals. So the time between the serial administrations, 1, 2, 6, was 10 minutes. The pressure and bronchoconstrictor effects were subject to tachyphylaxis, but the deep pressure effect was resistant to tachyphylaxis. Note in homeostasis, the parameters of physiology are selectively tachyphylactic. In other words, the body decides how to manage stress through complement. It is not automatic. It has to be selective because the body itself presents characteristics that are different from person to person and from time to time. So, by this experiment, we have established that there is progressive diminution in the magnitude of the response to subsequent and consecutive administrations. Quite an interesting observation. On another occasion, an isolated piece of ileum was subjected to complement stimulation, and the response was contraction of the ileum. Again, the ileum was stimulated consecutively. The ileum was stimulated consecutively, and it was observed that the isotonic contractions of the ileum of the guinea pig presented progressive diminution in the magnitude of the response that was induced by repeatedly administering submaximal doses of complement. Now, the next paragraph is the interesting bit. When maximal tachyphylaxis was attained, a rest period of 45 minutes provided substantial recovery, 60% recovery of the responsiveness of the tissue. The guinea pig ileum was rested for 45 minutes after maximum tachyphylaxis. And after that rest period of 45 minutes, there was a recovery. Now, there are people in the workforce who do not rest. Lawyers, judges, even surgeons, aeroplane pilots, taxi drivers, footballers, they don't rest. Even when they are fatigued, they keep on going and stressing themselves. If only they will take a little bit of time to rest, however small the rest period, they will then regain their capacity to perform. This is what this experiment showed us, that by resting your tissue being bombarded with complement for 45 minutes, when maximum tachyphylaxis had been attained, then it was possible to rejuvenate your tissue to the tune of 60%. Rest is critically important. If isolated guinea pig ileum will respond so positively, why not yourself? What are the social implications of all this? Social manifestations of Le Chatelier's principle can be effected through maintenance of social justice, which is the collective responsibility of all the citizens of the nation. In other words, if we find that there are individuals who are flouting the laws of the land, and doing things that they should not do, then we should use the judicial system to bring them to book. We shouldn't take the law into our own hands, but we shouldn't be silent. We should not be silent. If you go to the market and there's a refuse dump in the neighborhood, in the vicinity of the market where you go and buy your vegetables, and there's a toilet, is that the way we should live? We bring stress upon ourselves in various ways. Social behavior that is detrimental to national progress must be effectively denounced by the national judicial system and the law enforcement agencies also. A culture of judicial, academic, or intellectual silence does not promote national development, and it must be discouraged at all levels of social life. I'm not propounding a theory that is new. My dear Christian friends, let us speak out without being unduly violent to our neighbors, but just bring them to book. If you sit in your car and you notice somebody dropping the remains of pure water, maybe you will expose yourself to hostile abuse, so you will keep quiet and go. But this time it is the remains of pure water. Tomorrow it will be a black polythene bag containing something, human fecal matter. It is happening. That is creating stress for ourselves. Social stability fosters national growth and development. Peaceful coexistence ensures stress-free and a healthy national life. Social strife, however, impacts negatively on national progress. It degrades the sanctity of life and devalues the virtues of nature. I'm not propounding any new theories. I'm simply stating the facts as we know them. Mr. Chairman, dare I say a few things religious? I have asked somebody to prepare to read a few verses from the Bible. Are we going to deal with storm, which promotes stress? And we'll find our reference in the Gospel according to St. Mark, chapter 4, verses 37 to 41. Mark 4, 37 to 41. I asked somebody to raise your hand. Mark 4.
Mark chapter 4. Hands on 24. Hands on chapter 24. Hands on 24.
This is Matthew. And you're looking for 37 to 41.
Mark chapter 4, verse 37 to 41. And I read. And a great windstorm arose, and the waves beat into the boat, so that it was already filling. But he was in the stern, asleep on a pillow. And they awoke him and said to him, Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing? Then he arose and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, Peace, be still. And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. 40. Sorry. But he said to them, Why are you so fearful? How is it that you have no faith? 41. And they feared exceedingly and said to one another, Who can this be, that even the wind and the sea obey him? Thank you.
Thank you. Don't go yet. There's a second one. The way Jesus deals with storm in our life is simple. Like homeostasis in Jesus, the storm is manageable. There are individuals who think that they will allow storm in their life to prevail and move on. They become overly stressed and they can do nothing. But Jesus says, faith, if you consider what you are made of and what you are made for, you will live and survive the stresses of life. The next reference is Matthew 6, 25 to 30. Matthew 6, 25 to 30.
Matthew chapter 6, verse 25 to 30. And I read, Therefore I say to you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or what you will drink, nor about your body, what you will put on. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothing? 26. Look at the birds of the air, for they neither sow nor reap, nor gather into barns, yet your heavenly Father feeds them. And you are not of more value than, they. 27. Which of you, by worrying, can add 1 cubit to his stature? 28. So why do you worry about clothing? Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin. 29. And yet I say to you that even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. 30. Now if God so clothes the grass of the field, which today is and tomorrow is thrown into the oven, will he not much more clothe you, O you of little faith? Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, we'll deal with that in a second. Worry. Worry is part of stress. We worry a lot from little things. They are no longer little things, but magnified. And we are not able to get medical care for the stress that we bring upon ourselves through undue worry. And Jesus says that you don't gain anything by worrying. Just relax. Finally, rest.
Matthew
11:28.
chapter 11, verse 28. Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Thank you.
I wish, thank you very much, Fred. If I were a preacher man, I would take this as my text. And we will not go home. But I will not do that. Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. If I'm asked to take the key verse in my delivery, I'll tell you that rest is the key to our success as a nation. So in conclusion, Mr. Chairman, I'll say that stress evokes endogenous systems that can be life-threatening. Stress evokes endogenous systems that can be life-threatening. Stress also triggers the immune system to ensure homeostasis, stability, and peace. Stress is essential for the restoration of physiological equilibrium and sustainable health. Pharmacodynamic modulation of stress and rest has a significant bearing on social and religious attitudes that promote national progress. Prudent lifestyle of the citizens can mitigate stress, significantly reduce the national disease burden, and raise the quality of life of the nation. There are employers who think time spent resting is time wasted. So they engage the workforce and give them no rest. If you go to some of the enlightened countries, there is a break after every 2 hours of work. If you don't have anything at all, just get off your desk, have a glass of water, and take a 10-minute rest after every 2 hours. Here in this country, the master is himself at the desk from 8 to 5. They do this 24/7. Even God took a rest on the 7th day. Even God took a rest on the 7th day. But there are many presidents and prime ministers who never go on leave. They keep going until they fall dead. I will not mention names. But it is not wise to just keep going. You see, if you are a bank manager, if you are a CEO of any corporation, and you don't value life to the extent that you take no rest, then I'm afraid you will be doing yourself a lot of injustice and disservice. You need to rest. Recognize the fact that rest rejuvenates you. If we take the statistics of our nation and go to our mortuaries and find out how many people are there because they did not take the rest they deserved, you'll be amazed. Our productivity level is going down because we don't rest. The national insurance, the insurance companies encourage people to keep just. Even kindergarten school children are doing afternoon lectures, afternoon classes. Kindergarten. Should we not legislate to stop this menace, because the price we pay is later in life? You will retire at 60. You should be sleeping 8 hours a day. By the time you retire, for how long will you have been sleeping? Let me give the answer to my young friends. 8 hours is 1/3 of the 24-hour day. So if by the day you sleep 1/3 of the period, by the time you are 60, you will have been sleeping for 20 years. 20 years of sleep out of your 60, and your manager will tell you he's taking a loan from the bank. You'll pay back. So why should you rest? You should sleep only 4 hours and come to work. You will collapse and die. Then I've told you that the vital organs are operational at 100% at age 20, because the developmental years will bring you up to the 100% at age 20. Beyond that, you lose function at 10% per decade. So at age 30, you will be 90% functional, 80, 70, and so on. So if you calculate, as I would do, mathematically, you are going to live up to 120 years. Scientifically, that is what you are capable of having. At 20, you are 100%, and you lose 10% function every decade. So you can go till 120, provided you don't abuse yourself, provided you don't overstress yourself, provided you eat good food, you have fresh air, you don't, the environment is too polluted with Galamsey activities. With Galamsey activities, we are going to be all dead at less than 120. But there are the Chinese, the Japanese, and other people who recognize this fact, this model, and they live to the honor and glory of God. Finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue, and if there be any praise, think on these. This is a quotation from Philippians chapter 4 and verse 8. These are the virtues that make a nation great and strong. Let us live by them, and we shall be stress-free. Thank you.
Let's recognize our speaker again for this very exciting lecture on looking at stress. He's taken us through a myriad of areas this evening: biochemistry, physiology, pharmacology, the religions. And at the end, we are privileged that he's giving us the formula for longevity. He gave the formula at the end. You want to live to be 120, he's giving you the recipe. Rest and take care of your body and your activities. I believe this is a very exciting topic that provides a lot of insights for the young and the old. He also provides a lot of insights for us as a nation on the way we do things. I pray that as you reflect on this lecture, you will add value to your own life and the life of others. Thank you very much.
The President of the Academy, Vice Presidents, Fellows of the Academy, ladies and gentlemen, and our special guests, the students and the nursing fraternity, we have some few announcements. We would have some public lectures coming on as follows. On the 4th of October, there will be an inaugural lecture on the topic Access to Sustainable and Affordable Energy for All, the Role of Nuclear Energy. This will be done by Professor B.J.B. Nyako on 4th of October. On 10th of October, we'll have an inaugural lecture on the topic, The Tyranny of Expertise, and this will be by Professor Helen Law. They will all be here in this auditorium. Then on 26th of October, we'll have an inaugural lecture on the topic, Achieving Food and Nutrition Security Through Plant Breeding. This will be by Reverend Professor Hans Edu Dapa. I think it would be very good for all of us to be here to hear from the horse's own mouth what they will have to say to us. The announcement is that there will be reception outside immediately after the program. Fellows will meet in the usual place. Shall we please rise as the party leaves the rostrum?